Hello, this is Jessi Sletten from Empowering Postpartum, and welcome to the Spanglish World Networks on Zingo TV channels 250 and 251. Please remember to download both the Zingo TV app on the respective app stores on iOS and Android devices. While you download, make sure to rate and leave a comment. The app is totally free. Zingo TV is also available on Google Chromecast, Amazon Fire and Fire TV sticks, Roku and Roku sticks, and on all smart TVs 2016 and forward. And we are back for another value-packed episode of Empowering Postpartum with me, Jessi Sletten, your postpartum empowerment coach, helping you feel calm, confident, and prepared for your postpartum experience before birth so that you can have the peaceful fourth trimester you deserve. And my very special guest today is Dr. Brittany Panico, rheumatologist and founder of Summit Rheumatology. She'll be diving into a very interesting and important topic, which is navigating postpartum with an autoimmune disease. So welcome, Dr. Panico. Thank you so much for being here today.
Thank you for having me.
Absolutely. So I like to just kind of kick off our shows with having you just introduce yourself, tell us a bit about how you got into the work that you do, and then we'll get into all of the really fun stuff that we are planning on sharing today.
Awesome. Yeah, so I am Brittany Panico. I'm a board certified rheumatologist who treats adult patients in the Phoenix area. And then I also have a clinic in Oklahoma City, in Edmond, Oklahoma. And I really enjoy rheumatology because of the broad range of patients that we get to treat and really having that relationship with people as they navigate all stages of life. So I may see people 18 and over, and as that translates into, adulthood and beyond. And I think it's really special to, help people through these difficult times, navigating either a diagnosis of an autoimmune condition or just navigating, what treatment options are available, navigating what symptoms mean, and again, like how to help, sort all of that out. So I combine all kinds of different treatment modalities in my practice. And I think it's really awesome just to see how, we're able to change lives with the tools that we have in rheumatology.
Yeah, absolutely. That's amazing. I think it's a really unique field for sure. And I know several people in my family struggle with like arthritis type immune disorders. And I know that it's very life impacting. And so being able to have a physician or doctor or healthcare provider who can really help guide them on how to manage the symptoms and all those things is just really important, having somebody that listens and sits down and, has that compassion and understanding for sure. And I know that in the perinatal time frame, when it comes to autoimmune disorders, there can actually be an elevated risk for birth givers to actually, who've never had an autoimmune disorder, actually develop one in either pregnancy or postpartum. Or if they have one, they can either see flares or increased symptoms, or they see improvement. So I'd love to kind of get your thoughts on, why maybe we see some of these things and kind of maybe the more common disorders that you deal with, maybe in the pregnancy timeframe or the postpartum timeframe, and we can kind of go from there, because I know I'm interested in learning a little bit more about that.
Absolutely. Yeah. So as we kind of navigate, being a young female of childbearing age, there's a theory that estrogen plays a big role in kind of how autoimmune conditions present. We don't necessarily know if it's a certain level of estrogen, right? We can't track that it's too much or too little, but we just know that women have a predisposition to certain things like systemic lupus and rheumatoid arthritis. And those periods or those times where we often will diagnose women is usually of, childbearing age. So when we're trying to navigate starting families. So rheumatoid arthritis is one of the most common diagnoses that I see and treat in young women. And it used to be that, only older women get rheumatoid, right? Sometimes we have this image of a grandma with crooked knuckles or, crooked fingers, but it can actually present, at any time of adulthood, really. And a lot of times, we see an association with a recent illness. We see an association with increased stress. So going through the pregnancy process, right, whether you're navigating it naturally, whether you're going through fertility treatments, that's stress on you and your body. And, so sometimes that can kind of predispose us if we're genetically already predisposed, meaning that we have a family member who might have an autoimmune condition. So it is common that we see new diagnoses and then navigate again how that translates through pregnancy and postpartum. Some conditions can, like you mentioned, calm down during pregnancy because our immune system is already working to not fight the baby. So our immune system sometimes goes through this sort of like period where it's not as overactive. But with things like lupus, that's not always the case. Sometimes lupus can get more active when we're pregnant as women, particularly when we think about kidney disease. Because our kidneys are already vulnerable, having increased fluid in our body from pregnancy. So then when you have the baby deliver and go through that, change, that surge and change in hormones again, we can see another change in presentation or symptoms. Some women will flare, some women will sort of, go into remission and symptoms will be more manageable. So it's really unpredictable. I think my best advice is listen to your body, because if something doesn't feel right, that's when, it's helpful to seek out care, because you are the most in tune to what's happening to yourself and your body, where we can't predict who's going to flare. We can't predict who's going to do well during those phases again of, navigating pregnancy, during pregnancy, and postpartum.
Yeah, absolutely. I think this, calls to mind the whole concept of everybody's journey is going to be different, like during the perinatal time frame. There's a lot going on and our bodies are, very unique and, we just don't know. We don't know what's going to happen. We can't predict it. But I love what you say about trust how your body feels. Listen in to your body. If something doesn't feel normal, there's nothing wrong or bad or negative about bringing it up, right? When we sit on it and we don't really lean into that intuition as much, that's when we can really end up having longer term issues and not really getting the help we need. So absolutely, I agree. It's super important for us to speak up for ourselves, to advocate on behalf of ourselves, and just really understanding what doesn't feel right and normal, even though it can be kind of hard in those times too, because our bodies probably don't feel very normal, right? During pregnancy as it is, and postpartum. So it can be a little hard to kind of navigate, oh, is this like normal weird, or is this like not good, not common, weird? So that open communication, I think, is just super important.
Absolutely. And also just not being afraid to ask questions. I think a lot of times, I'm guilty of it too. I'm a mom of 3. And the first thing I do is, lay in bed at night and Google, right? And when we look up all these things online, it's really easy to work ourselves into, these scenarios and these stories that we tell ourselves are true. And I think the biggest thing from a perspective, not only as, as a woman who's been pregnant, but as a healthcare provider, is there's no silly or dumb questions that you can ask your healthcare team, even if you feel like, you may have experienced gaslighting before, you may have been told, it's just part of how your body's changing. It's that persistence of, okay, we had that conversation, but it still doesn't feel right. Or I still am having swelling in places that make it hard for me to move, or I'm still noticing, maybe my ankles shouldn't be swollen this early during pregnancy, and we need to look into why that's the case. And being really, an advocate for your own healthcare, because we're in some really interesting times right now. And I experienced my 3rd pregnancy in the height of the COVID pandemic, when women were dying. And it was really, really scary to go through that period where, I thought we've got this down pat, right? Women have been delivering babies and having successful pregnancies for hundreds of years. Why are we now seeing so many women having, issues during pregnancy? And part of it is, trusting your body when something isn't right. Keep going back, keep showing up for yourself and asking those questions, because it's so easy to just brush it off of, oh, I'm tired because I'm pregnant, or I'm tired because I have toddlers and I'm pregnant. But having labs done, having, extra testing done is really how we discover a lot of these things, especially autoimmune related things. And if that's not offered to you up front, asking, like, I looked online and I'm concerned I might have rheumatoid arthritis. This joint pain just doesn't seem like it is typical for what I, should be going through, or I'm concerned, I have a family member who had lupus. I want to be evaluated for that. And just, really trying to get some answers if you feel like something is wrong.
Yeah. Oh, I love that so much because I think it is. You're absolutely right. It's those of us who have experienced some of that gaslighting in the medical community, or we've had other things going on, where we feel like, oh, well, they're the experts, so I'm just going to just be quiet and I'll just deal with it, right? And it's not. We don't have to settle for that. Just because something is common doesn't mean that it's normal. And then I was talking to my guest last week. And she's amazing too. She's, a nurse practitioner who deals with a lot of unique disorders and stuff in the postpartum timeframe. And her idea is, well, just because it's normal, it doesn't mean it's optimal. So
Right.
There's all these things that we really have to kind of keep close to our hearts and in mind when we're like, okay, I don't have to settle for how I feel if it's not where I need to be or want to be. And bringing it up over and over again is going to create that paper trail for you in your medical records also, so that people can kind of see how long this has been going on. And keeping track of your own symptoms, I think, is something that's really been helpful for me when I've brought things to my doctor, to be like, okay, here's kind of what I've been noticing, and being like really proactive before you get into the medical room to talk to the doctor,
Yes.
having kind of your ducks in a row.
It is helpful, and it makes the visit go quite a bit smoother when patients bring up, okay, this has been going on for this amount of time, or I've tried this, or I've thought about this. Definitely. Right. And I think too, one of the things, as somebody too, being pregnant, we're a little bit nervous about medications, right? Like, are there safe medication options that I can take while I'm pregnant? And the answer is yes. In rheumatology, we have a list of medications that are tried and true, safe during pregnancy and breastfeeding. So I think too, it's also acknowledging, even though you might not necessarily want to be prescribed a medication, your body is really vulnerable during that period, right? During pregnancy and postpartum. And we may need, a little bit extra help kind of navigating, getting those symptoms under control. And there are medications that are completely safe. So just having that awareness too of like, okay, I'm not going to be deciding, do I compromise, the health of my baby, or do I have to give up breastfeeding just because I'm being prescribed something? The answer is absolutely not. We can navigate majority of situations in a safe way. There's occasion where it's, a little bit, we may have to have a discussion, but for the most part, there's ways that we can navigate, prescribing completely safe medications.
Yeah, I think that is really a key thing for people to walk away with, because I know it wasn't autoimmune for me, but I was on medication for other things. And it was like, I just have to quit cold turkey because I don't want this to affect the baby. When in reality, like, the risks of not being on the medication were way worse than the benefits of staying on it, because you have to think about your own health too, and not just the health of the baby, because your health determines kind of the success that your baby is having during pregnancy, right? And if it's something that's going to really affect your health or your, quality of life even, it's super important to take that into consideration when you're making these decisions, when it comes to medication, and really seeking out that advice from healthcare providers who are knowledgeable about breastfeeding and pregnancy and all those kind of things too. So absolutely, I think that's a really important message. Like, you don't have to suffer through something and just stop taking medication just because you're pregnant or breastfeeding. There are other options out there for sure.
Absolutely. And I think too, a lot of times women, if we're navigating a diagnosis, right, we often wonder, well, can I even breastfeed?
Right.
And the answer is yes. If that is a goal of yours, by all means, we can find ways to navigate that. Because I think that decision in and of itself, right, we may decide while we're pregnant what we're going to do. And then we may change our mind after we deliver. And you may change your mind several times. And, that's completely okay. And again, just having that conversation of, this is a goal of mine. I don't necessarily know how long I want to breastfeed, but I want to, what medication options are safe. And that's, we can completely work with patients about that. Yeah. And I think too, to your, testament, what you were saying, right? Like your health as the mother, as the vessel, right? Growing the child is so important, because we put everybody else's needs before ours once we enter motherhood. And really it's that, put your own oxygen mask on first mentality, right? If our bodies are not strong enough, and this includes our minds, right? If our being is not strong enough to grow a baby, there's going to be downstream effects of that, right? So it may be, that there's a risk of complication or a risk of premature delivery, or, other things that could be a risk factor if we're not taking care of ourselves. Right. And so it's that, again, conversation. And I offer my pregnant and postpartum patients, contact me when you need me. But if you want to follow up more closely, right? Like some diseases like lupus, for example, we tend to follow a little more closely during that phase of life, because the transitions can really mean activity of your disease happens fast. Yeah. So we'll, see patients a little bit closer together, and in combination with, OBGYN, or if you have high risk pregnancy involved, or whoever's on your healthcare team, right? We coordinate management. And I think there's this sort of nervousness of like, do I really feel secure that somebody's going to catch something if it happens? And that's where, asking for additional, like, can I see you a little bit more frequently just to make sure? I have patients who ask, to do their blood work a little bit more frequently than what is like normal follow-up, because that's what gives them peace of mind. And that is completely fine. We can work with people of, all different sort of needs and desires of how they can control their health too. Yes. So,
yeah, absolutely. Being in that control is so empowering and important. But then entering into this as a partnership, that's something that I always encourage my clients is, this is a partnership where you work together to figure out what's best for you, your baby, your family as a whole. So it should be this open line of communication where, they're willing to meet you where you need to be met, and I think that's sometimes hard for us to remember, especially when there's that imbalance of power sometimes when we get into the room and, oh, it's the doctor, they know what they're talking about. I just should follow along, with what they're saying, and, really try to challenge that concept in your mind. If that's kind of how you feel entering in the room, just really know that you have power within yourself too. And it's a partnership. It's not something that you just have to, follow along because the doctor, is saying something. Question it, ask why, really ask those questions and get curious. And I think that there's a lot of empowerment in that for sure.
Absolutely. And I think too, one of the unique things that I try to offer my patients is telemedicine options. So if you live in an area where it may be a little bit harder to switch doctors, or, if you feel like you haven't developed that partnership with the person that you're following with, see if other people maybe, on the opposite side of town or a neighboring town are willing to see you over telemedicine. And I think, I'm a little biased being a female and a mom, but if I have somebody reach out and say, look, I really just, I feel like I need some extra care, and can I switch, into your practice? If we get that message, right, I think most healthcare, providers are willing to say, yes, you are somebody who needs my help, and certainly. So I think too, like, explore that option if you feel like you're not getting the kind of care that you need, because there's this traditional medical model, right, where we have to go to somebody in our town, we have to see, a certain type of practice, but a lot more people, especially private practice physicians and private practice practitioners, are offering non-traditional kind of ways to help care for patients, because we're looking to reach people who want our expertise as well. And so, if people come to us that are not specifically, it's not doable to drive that distance, it's worth asking. Just know though that from a medical perspective, we have to be in the same state as the patient due to license restrictions. So it's not as easy to transfer across state borders, but I have patients who live 4 hours away from my practice in Oklahoma, and we do majority telemedicine, and it works out. So that can be an option for you too, if you're kind of like cold calling practices saying, do you have this an option? I live too far away to drive.
Yeah. Well, especially I think for specialists, that can be really hard because sometimes the options are, excuse me, already pretty low, or what's out there available depending on where you live. And so having that ability to say, oh, I could maybe look to the telehealth route, so I don't have to just stick with the only rheumatologist that's in, this
Yeah.
specific area. It gives you a lot more options of creating a really good partnership and feeling really good with the provider that you're with. So I think that that's a really great piece of advice. And I know, we've kind of talked a little bit about the medication management. I'd love to get your thoughts on the symptom management side, because I know that the symptoms, right, are the things that we notice and that can impact our life. So I'd love to get, your thoughts on how, if you're dealing with this type of issue in your postpartum timeframe, how you can manage it to be a little bit easier.
Yeah. So I think it's a combination. I think really a lot of it depends on what condition we're actually talking about. So rheumatoid arthritis symptoms vary a little bit from, say, lupus or like ankylosing spondylitis or psoriatic arthritis or even Sjogren's symptoms. So I think it really comes down to like what disease we're talking about. But for the most part, it's really understanding, is this like a one day where I'm really tired and fatigued and I'm, my baby is not sleeping right now. I'm trying my best, to do all the things, right? And am I just really sleep deprived? And is that kind of the root of what's going on? Because we experience a heightened sense of pain and sort of agitation when we're sleep deprived, even without having a diagnosis. I mean, I know myself, when I was in that phase of life and, waking up every few hours, right? Like my whole body just hurt all the time.
Right. Yeah.
So understanding, like, first of all, like kind of stepping back and saying, okay, what is the main thing that I'm going through right now? Is it that my hands are swollen and I can't twist to open the bottles, or I can't manipulate my pump, or I can't change a diaper, or I can't hold the baby without feeling like I'm going to drop them?
Yeah.
Like, what is the main thing that you're feeling? And then really noticing, like, are there physical signs along with that, right? Swelling, redness, heat, the inability to like make a fist and grip. So are you feeling something that then is visible on the outside too?
Yeah.
And then, either coordinating with your healthcare provider, or, really taking a look, like, have I been skipping some of my doses of medication? Because I am so tired and I'm forgetting, right? It's really easy to just sort of have our medicine and, behind a cabinet or inside of a closed space, and we don't really like see it to remind ourselves to take it. So I tell people, put it in the most obvious of places. Like if you need it right next to your toothbrush, again, make sure it's safe, that you don't have little kids, navigating that, but make it visible to you, or set yourself reminders. Like if you're doing one of the injection medications, it's so easy to just skip a week because we get so busy with life, but make yourself a visible like cue to take your medication, to remind yourself about it. Because oftentimes when flares happen or symptoms start happening are because you're either really close to due for your medication, if you're on a cycle of something, or if you start kind of skipping doses or aren't as, on top of, if you take it twice a day, are you maybe only taking it once a day? And that's kind of when breakthrough things might start happening. If it's a brand new diagnosis, you've never been diagnosed, that's when it's time to, okay, this has been going on for more than a few days in a row. Now my symptoms are starting to kind of spread to other joints. It's not just my hands that hurt, my feet are killing me too, or, my elbow is swollen now, things like that, where it starts to accumulate and add up. And that's when it's time to, definitely ask for help. I think the whole idea of like, okay, do we, how do we do the things that are accessible to us, right? Like if we're looking at home, between ice and heat, I tell people, do what feels comfortable. Right now I'm in Phoenix in the middle of the summer. We do not want to put heat anywhere on our body. I can't imagine being comforted by heat. But if you feel like having a heating pad on your lower back, or you feel like, on your upper shoulders, that just feels good to you, do what feels better, because when you start to relax and you start to be able to like think about what your next step is going to be, a lot of times we're so overwhelmed in the moment of like all the things that we have going on in our brain. It's really hard to separate, okay, what decision do I need to make to move forward in this? Right? If I'm waking up in pain every day, what decision do I need to make so that I can understand what that means, or navigate maybe how to have better control over that? So doing the things that help you feel better so that you can kind of think more clearly. And again, making sure you're getting enough rest. I know it's so easy to tell new moms and pregnant moms that you need to sleep more, but we try to do too many things. We try to do everything for everyone. And instead of asking for help and asking, for a break to let our bodies recover and heal, it's so easy to just lay on the couch and watch Netflix and, not actually sleep, but our body starts to heal when we sleep. So that is one of the best self-care tips that I give anyone, male or female. Are you getting enough sleep? Because if you're not, it's so hard to move to the next step. And then I think too, like when we think about managing symptoms with supplements, I'm always really cautious, because there's a lot more reports coming out now with the available online plethora of things that you can buy. A lot of the supplements that we're able to purchase they're not regulated by any kind of industry. So you're buying something that you might not really know what it is, and it may have a detrimental effect if you continue to take it. So there's a lot of data coming out in the medical world about supplements causing liver issues and kidney issues, and they may cause downstream effects. So particularly if you're breastfeeding and pregnant, supplements are not always safe. So I would definitely, have a discussion with your healthcare team about what supplements are safe to take, and whether or not, continuing those during pregnancy and postpartum are okay.
Yeah, absolutely. Well, and I think sometimes we get into our brain, where, it's natural, so it's probably a safer choice. And it's not the case, and I think that that's something that's really important for all of us to kind of embrace, is that, in the medical arena, when it comes to pharmaceuticals, they are studied, and there's a lot that goes into it. They're, like you said, regulated, they're watched over, and with the supplements, we could have, first of all, is it even what you say is in this supplement? Because it could not be. It could be a bunch of other stuff that they don't have to list on the labels because they're not being, monitored or anything. So it's definitely one of those things where just because if something's natural, it doesn't automatically make it better. So really having those open conversations, I think, is super important. Like you said, absolutely.
Yeah. And I think too, like, navigating, tying this into breastfeeding too, one of the biggest things that I noticed as a mom, as I went through each of my breastfeeding journeys, is really like fluid. Are we drinking enough to actually produce milk? Because one of the things that I struggled with my first baby was I was in training, I was working an insane schedule and not drinking near enough, or I was drinking soda or fluid, but I wasn't drinking water or the things that my body needed to convert to milk. So I supplemented he had a little bit of breast milk and mostly formula, because I wasn't making enough milk for him. And thinking back on that journey, I realized then with my second experience, okay, I need to drink water to make milk. And that's one of the other things that we often really overlook, especially as healthcare providers. We don't talk as much about, are the symptoms that you're feeling potentially your body being dehydrated? Is some of this exacerbated, just like how sleep deprivation can change the way our body feels? I think as a culture and society, we're a little bit chronically dehydrated versus what our body actually needs. And it's really, I think it gets annoying to have to go to the bathroom every, half hour, every hour when you're literally drinking as much water as you need to breastfeed. But that's a cue. Okay, I am getting enough fluid that I have enough to make milk and go to the bathroom. Because it's so easy to just be like, well, I haven't really peed that much today. I didn't take a shower. I didn't pee. Like, why do I feel this way? And a lot of it comes down to fluid. I mean, it's so common to get headaches when you're dehydrated. A lot of times our hunger cues come from actually being more dehydrated. So if you find that you're like snacking nonstop, that may be a sign that you need more fluid too. So I think, really, again, taking that sort of inventory of your needs, right? What are your needs? Hunger, feeding yourself, fluids, sleep, and then being able to make decisions about what else to do. But what I was trying to connect to that was the supplements to help, produce more breast milk. I know there's a lot of things out there, that say, take this if you want to make more milk. And I did all those things because I was desperate. And again, understanding, okay, what is like a natural thing, right? What is a marketed thing that seems trusted versus what is something I'm sort of like putting this cocktail together to make, and not getting as caught up in like the taking of something, because our bodies as women know what to do. We are genetically programmed to know how to grow a baby and rear a baby. And so we just have to give ourselves the fuel to do that. And it took me 3 pregnancies to realize that. And then by the 3rd one, it was like, oh, okay, if I put gas in my tank, I will then produce an output, right? Rather than forcing yourself to like struggle with supplements. And the other thing too, that is just sort of an added, thing about supplements, but it gets expensive. It gets really expensive to buy all those supplements and take them all. And who likes that feeling of all that stuff sitting in your throat? So water is not expensive, and food, you can buy healthy, fresh food for the most part. We have, access. I love Walmart's produce. It may not last as long as other places, but they have great sales and great options. So it doesn't have to be this fancy organic stuff. It can literally just be what you have in your own neighborhood that's accessible to you. So I think with symptom management, again, to kind of tying this all together, is like really assessing like, what are your needs? Not necessarily going to Google and saying, what does the industry tell me I need, right? What does the postpartum breastfeeding industry tell me I need to do to make enough milk? But what does my body actually need?
Yes. Yep. Leaning back into that intuitive nature of our, listening to our bodies. And I loved what you said about really focusing back in on the basics of self-care. That is what we're focused on in pregnancy and in postpartum. We're not worried about the vacations or the spa days or whatever. Forget about that. We know nobody has time for that with a new baby, right? So we bring it back down to those hierarchy of needs. The very base, we talk about getting enough rest, getting enough water, and nourishing our bodies in ways that help us get the energy we need, help us heal our birthing wounds, all these things, right? And those are truly the cornerstones. And all these conversations we have, whether it's about autoimmune disorders or just, a regular navigating, postpartum experience, you have to be focused on your own needs. And it is often very basic, and we often overlook it because it is so basic. We're looking for a more complicated answer to this seemingly complicated question, when in reality, it's probably something very easy and accessible for us to bring back into our lives, right?
And I think too, just like acknowledging that, right? Like, what is something easy? Again, like when we're so overwhelmed with what kind of decisions to make, like, what is the easiest next step that I can take?
Yep.
drink a glass of water, right? Then what is the easiest next step I can take? Maybe there's some yogurt in my fridge, or, something with a little bit of fat. I think too, we get really focused on our body image, right?
Totally.
Postpartum,
Yep.
like I've got to be able to look a certain way by this certain amount of time. You
Right.
just grew a baby.
Right.
Your body will do what it does. And again, like it took me all 3 of my pregnancies to realize that. But
Mhm.
the part of when we stress ourselves out, especially with if you have an autoimmune
Mhm.
condition, when we put pressure on ourselves to lose weight or to look a certain way,
Yeah.
that is additional stress that combats how we can help ourselves.
Yeah.
So our medication, there's no perfect body size to make our medication
Mhm.
work. There's no perfect weight that you have to be when you go into the doctor to have a successful treatment. But
Right.
it's, again, if we're depriving ourselves of calories and nutrients, that allows our body to heal, like you said, right? We're healing literally wounds, but we're also
Mhm.
healing the inflammation that our autoimmune condition triggers. So if we're depriving our body of those healing nutrients and compounds and minerals, we're not going to fix anything, or we're not letting the medication work its best way, because we're depriving those building blocks that everything else needs.
Yep.
So I think too, that's something that I sometimes see, is that, patients or women will come in and say, well, I'm really struggling with weight loss. But it's like, when you sit down and really talk about it, are
Mhm.
you eating enough actually calorie rich and calorie beneficial meals, right? Like avocado, things with coconut oil. Like we get scared of fats,
Yeah.
but that's what our brain and our body needs to heal. We have to repair
Absolutely.
that tissue with more so fats than specifically carbohydrates. So when we deprive ourselves of like nutrient dense foods,
Mhm.
we're not giving those building blocks that we need to have a healthy immune system and to have healthy tissue that heals, and to repair those wounds like you mentioned. So that's
Absolutely. Yeah.
important to think about too.
What was that?
I said, so that's important to think about too, going back to the
Yes.
basics, right? Like, am I thinking too much into, now that I'm depriving myself of what
Yeah.
my body actually needs?
Absolutely. Oh my gosh. Yeah. We could talk for hours on the toxicity of bounce back culture and just the pressure that we are all under to look a certain way after we've just created a whole new life and birthed that life out of our bodies. And now we continue to care for that little being, with our own bodies sometimes if we're breastfeeding. It's insane to me that, there's all this pressure that we have to wade through when we become new moms. But I couldn't agree with you more that nutrient dense foods should be one of the biggest things that we prioritize for ourselves, and really kind of preparing ahead of time of understanding what those are, how we can easily make, simple meals, simple snacks with these really nutrient dense foods. And this is when enlisting help is so important. And
Mhm.
we cannot do this on our own, like successfully and without creating, some deficits somewhere. We need to be able to have a system around us, even if it's just one other person or our partner who's helping make sure that we can prioritize our rest, our hydration, our nutrition, all these things. Because when you have that other person or, a couple people who can help bolster you up and help remind you or help make it easier for you to make it happen, that's when we actually can see it as a possibility versus, well, when am I going to find time to sit
Mhm.
down and, eat this snack when my baby's crying and the dishes are piling up, like this should be a time. I heard a quote once where, postpartum should be a time for receiving. It should be this time where we are mothered as we are mothering. And that's something that our culture has lost,
Yeah, I
unfortunately.
agree. And I that resonates really with me too, because when I had my first baby, I was like, again, I was going through medical training, and in medicine, everything is like independence, right? Like how
Mhm.
much of this can you do on your own? Of course,
Right.
we work as a team, but we're needing to learn to make those decisions on our own and not necessarily depend and rely on as many other people. So I had this like Miss Independent mentality. I have to do this all, figure this all out.
Right.
And it was so detrimental. It
Yeah.
really was my biggest downfall. And I think why I had the hardest time navigating that, because I didn't let anyone else in. I tried to do it all. And then when I couldn't, right, none of us can,
Right.
it was this like, huge disappointment and stress and, tension with everything. But you're right. Even if, somebody takes the baby while you sort of pre-pack your smoothie ingredients, or, again, separating yourself a little bit of like, okay, I'm going to schedule 20 minutes where I meal prep the best way that I can and set aside my medication and organize myself. So when I am in the middle of all this, the baby's crying and I can't think straight,
Right.
it's laid out, right? There's no thought behind it other than just add the liquid, or just, add something simple. And I think I got hung up a lot on the like, the feeling of like, well, I don't want that right now, or that doesn't taste good to me right now. And part of it is, we want things to be desirable, but there's also that part that's just like how you don't necessarily know why your baby's crying. You got to just kind of do it, right? You give them milk, or you change their diaper, or you do something, right? Thinking about ourselves, how are we communicating to ourselves? You just have to, again, make that one decision and start somewhere. And then, after that glass of water, you start to feel, oh, well, now maybe my headache's a little bit better, right? But the water wasn't what you wanted.
Right, exactly. No, that's such a good point. And I think it's important too, because sometimes when we have these cravings, or, a lot of times we're exhausted, right? So our body's like, we need energy. And so we get these cravings for carbs or sweets. And, that's fine. We can lean into that, occasionally. It's great. But we also can understand that it's a more sustainable energy if we have a fat paired with protein, or, pair that carb with a fat or protein so that your blood sugar is more balanced. It's all about kind of like understanding, okay, like you said, I didn't get enough sleep last night. I'm exhausted and I'm craving all these things. None of that nutrient dense stuff sounds good. Well, it's probably because my body's like, you need more energy. So how can I give my body what it needs, and then I can have that piece of chocolate or whatever, with it too. But understanding that sometimes our cravings can be a sign of what our body needs, and that we can lean into those, but we also need to make sure that we're trying to incorporate those other more nutrient dense foods that are going to meet those needs in a more full way, I guess.
Yeah.
Yeah.
And the same thing too about, going along those lines of like being on a regimen with your medication, right? Like assessing, did I skip something, or am I a couple of days late for my shot, right? That might be why all of a sudden I don't feel as good. So the more stuff you can pre-plan, that does make it so much easier. And there's always this feeling of being behind, right? It's like we have the best intentions before we have the baby, and then stuff just happens. But I have three boys, and my husband, we both work full time, and we set aside a certain time of the weekend to just like plan. We have a calendar where everybody's schedule is on, and that gets updated, and just having like a routine where you create, this hour of my week is where I devote to pre-planning. And it doesn't need to take long. It doesn't have to be a whole day. I used to kind of think, okay, we got to sit down together and like go through everything.
Right.
But now we just each update it, on our own, and then talk about it and go through things. So there's no surprises. And that really helps too, of just being on the same page and understanding where you need help, right? Like, okay, my partner is going to be home late, but I've had the baby for 3 days straight and I need a break. How can I call a friend and, ask somebody to come over, or try to get out of the house and get some fresh air and just clear my head? And what things can you plan that you're going to be needing when the time comes, but are going to be too hard to make that decision like in the moment?
Yes. Yeah. Because like you said, you're overwhelmed in the moment, and so having that kind of understanding either planned, ahead, or having, like, I even tell my clients, have a list of things that is, fills your bucket, right? And it could be very simple. So then when you're feeling overwhelmed, you can just look at that list instead of trying to like find the exact thing that's going to help you in that moment from the scraps of, brain power you have left over. You can look at it and say, oh, that's right. Like I haven't done a walk outside in a really long time. I just want to take like a 5-minute walk outside, or whatever that might be, reading, or, something that helps you fill your bucket up again. Having that already thought out and listed so that you don't have to, put so much brain power into making decisions.
Yeah, I love that. And, being somebody who prescribes medication, I think too, like reminding yourself that you feel better when you take your medication.
Yeah.
I've had some patients who they may be on like a monthly injection, and during the visits, it's like, at what point do you start to feel the medication wear off? So if on your bucket list is, I feel better when, and then you're realizing, you're looking at that like, ooh, I don't feel that that's true for me anymore. That's a sign to talk at your next appointment of, I'm not getting the kind of length of relief I feel like I should have.
Yeah.
And that's where I can then offer, or, your healthcare team can offer suggestions on changing therapy, right? Like if you're not getting the desired length of time in between your doses, what other options might be available to change that for you? Or how can we tweak things a little bit so that that's better for you?
Yeah.
Because like we mentioned early on, coming prepared to your visits, if you come in and say everything is fine, there's not everybody is going to probe. I'm somebody who like nitpicks, and I'm like, is really everything fine? But not everybody will sit down and do that. So if you come in and say, I used to feel like I got 2 to 4 weeks of really great relief, and now I'm not feeling that way, that's a big clue of like, okay, how can we adjust medication? So I think that's really something that's easy to overlook, is reminding yourself that I feel better when I take my medication, because we all know that we don't want to feel like we're dependent on medication. I totally understand that. But when you have an autoimmune condition, your body in that moment of time, when you're struggling with those symptoms, needs a reset, or needs to be sort of shuttled in a certain direction so that you feel better. So it's not a dependence per se, but it's like a redirection, right?
Yeah.
For those of us who, have kids and have toddlers, when they just run around chaotic, you have to redirect them, right? Our immune system is that uncontrolled toddler when we have an autoimmune disease. It's just going haywire, and we have to focus it back. And when we do that with medication, we then start to feel better. If you don't feel better, you might not necessarily be on the right medication for your body. And so kind of having those conversations with your healthcare team of, I'm supposed to feel better. I think I'm supposed to feel better, but maybe I don't, or maybe I don't feel better enough the way that I want to feel. So that's really helpful, because when I have the most success with my patients is when together we really reach for a goal, right? We strive for feeling a certain way that we think is achievable. And even if there's this sort of part of you that says, I don't really want to have to need my medication, allow yourself to feel better with it. Because when you do, again, those other things are more attainable, and there's less overwhelm and less, of the other noise and chatter going on that we struggle with. So if during your pregnancy and postpartum period, you kind of allow yourself, I probably might feel better when I take my medication, and then remind yourself, yes, I got my dose today. Now I can start to feel better, because there's also that power in believing, right? When we believe something is going to work, it really does affect us. So if we think that we're helping our bodies feel better, then, and remind ourselves of that, then we're going to show up happier and less stressed and with more energy to tackle all the things that we have to do.
Absolutely. Yeah. And the power of those thoughts are definitely there for sure. I always tell my kids too, like, if you think it's going to be a bad day, it's going to be a bad day. But if you think that I can turn this around, yeah, it's hard right now, validate that feeling and then say, what can I do to turn things around and make this a better day? Watch your day get better, right? It's so true.
Absolutely.
Because we show up different for sure.
Yeah. And I think, that's really true, I think, for the symptom of fatigue. So one of the hardest things to treat in healthcare is the feeling of being tired and fatigued, right? Because we don't really know where it comes from, and it's hard to measure, and it's hard to categorize because we all live different lives at different paces and force ourselves to do different things. And some people have a lot of physical energy that they expel. Some people have a lot of mental energy that they expel. So it's really hard to figure out why we're so fatigued.
Right.
But if we can tell ourselves, or I guess I should say not tell ourselves that constant reminder of I'm so tired, I'm fatigued all the time. Because that's the voice that plays over and over and over, right? Is we are what we tell ourselves. And so if we re-navigate that and reform that narrative of, I might have woken up a little bit tired today, but I can have more energy as the day goes on, or I can make choices that allow me to feel a little more clear-headed as the day goes on, and try to navigate through that instead of dwelling and sitting in that fatigue.
Yes.
And again, I'm not saying that it's all in our head. It is
Right.
absolutely not. But there is that voice that does tell us that we're tired all the time, and that has a lot of weight to it.
Absolutely. Yeah. Really getting curious about where that's coming from, and then what is in your power to hopefully lessen that, or, improve whatever it is that you're experiencing. So then, of course, back to the basics we talked about, did I get enough water? Do I need to take a nap instead of washing the dishes? It's okay to let the dishes sit for a couple days if that means you're going to get more rest, So really just kind of reprioritizing and trying to give your body what it needs to help impact that in a positive way makes the thinking of it a little bit easier too, because you're seeing it in the evidence of, getting a little bit more energy because I ate that really great nutrients dense snack instead of just starving myself because the baby fell asleep on me or something, it's just really where you can look to find that impact and gain back that control is super important in a time where so much is out of our control. So I think that those little reminders are really powerful. Absolutely. Well, I think we're getting close to time. But before we go, I always like to have my guests just share, where can people connect with you out in the big wide world of the internet and kind of, get to know you a little bit better and follow what you love to talk about?
Yes, I would love to connect. So my practice is called Summit Rheumatology. We're based out of Arizona and Oklahoma. And I have my own social media that's independent of my practice, Dr. Brittany Panico. So I'm on Instagram, Facebook, and YouTube at Dr. Brittany Panico.
Great. That's wonderful. Well, this has been such a insightful and really informative episode. So thank you again for joining me, Dr. Panico. It's been very eye-opening, and I'm hoping the audience learned a lot. And I want to remind everybody too that if you are pregnant, I have my postpartum prep course available. You can get it right at my Instagram here in the bio. It's the perfect course to help you figure out what you need to prepare for before baby gets here. So we're talking about these cornerstones of health, of being our sleep and our nutrition and our help, our village that we need to curate and create ahead of time. All these things are covered in this course, and it's really just walks you through step by step how to make it fit your life, your family, your needs, so that you feel like you can step into motherhood with a lot more confidence and feeling way more prepared than just winging it. So if you're interested,
I would love to have that.
Yes, right. So that's definitely something that's available at my link in the bio. So definitely check that out. And just as a reminder too, this show can be heard on the Spanglish Radio Network. And you can check it out at spanglishworld.ca for more news and programming. Spanglish World, watch it, hear it, read it, download it, and live it. And we will see you all next week. Thank you so much, Dr. Panico.
Thank you. Thank you.
Bye.